Painter and gouache just started a new gouache course at Forstall. I'm going to let Andy talk about it because she knows a lot more about it than I do. Tonight is small group, obviously, and the work is small. She's painting small, so please feel free to get up and walk around and come up here. We've got Zoom hooked up. Doing the best we can. So I'm going to let Andy talk about the class real quick. And
so Nancy's going to be doing Tuesday evening classes, and they're going to be drop-in until the class is full. She's also going to be doing a workshop on a Saturday, so if you don't want to do an evening class, it's all day on Saturday, November 14th. And it's a really cool class. It's going to be similar to tonight's limited palette, so gouache with a limited palette in the class. And then Caleb Clark, who is our artist last month, is doing drawing with paint. So he is doing a Wednesday evening class. He's also doing a demo in October and a workshop in November. So we got a lot of really positive responses last month wanting to take from him. So I did it. And these flyers are on the table and you're welcome to take them. So.
Andy?
Yes?
Are the demos free or a little fee to attend? I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, great question. So the demos are $20, and it's a 2-hour demo, and it's basically just a sample of the class. It is hands-on. There is a supply list.
Oh.
So it's basically just like a single class, but like meant to be in one. So, any other questions? All right.
I would just like to say thank you, Amy, and Forstall, for all you do.
Yes.
No, I'm okay, I don't need that.
she told me she
It's just to do kind of a color comp. Any oil painters in here? Do you ever do color comps of your paintings before you get started?
What's a color comp?
I will get into that.
Okay.
First I'll do a little background about me, just so you guys understand kind of where I come from and what I like to do. My name's Nancy. I'm from Birmingham. I grew up here. I actually went to Mountain Brook Elementary, and then I branched off to other schools, but Mountain Brook is kind of home to me. But I went to SCAD. I graduated a little over a year ago, and I studied illustration there. So my main medium is digital illustration, graphic design, that kind of stuff. But I love to paint in gouache and also in acrylic. The techniques that I'm going to show you today, I learned from one of my professors at SCAD, Stephen Gardner. He is a prolific gouache painter, and he does book covers for like mystery, romance books, things like that.
What's his name again, Stephen?
Stephen Gardner. You can find him on Instagram. I think it's
With a V or PH?
PH. Yes, Stephen with a PH. I urge you all to look him up. He's incredible. He posts videos. He does incredible work. And so I'm kind of basing this off of the way that he taught me how to paint with gouache. And is anyone familiar with gouache at all? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Some of you know it can be a little bit finicky and intimidating if you haven't worked with it before. I like to recommend it to watercolor painters as well as oil painters. It's similar to watercolor, as many of you know, in the way that it's water soluble, right? But the difference is you can lift it back up off of the page once it dries. So
Can or cannot?
you can. So with watercolor, once you paint with it and it dries down, it's permanent. It's not going to go anywhere. You could theoretically work some water back into it, but you're not going to be able to lift it up and do much with it in that sense. I'll actually show you an example, my bad, of what you can do. You can even wet a piece of paper towel or a dish rag, and I just wiped up all of that paint. So let's say you make a mistake, you can just...
After it was dry.
After it was dry. Yeah, you don't need to work quickly in that way. It's a little bit intimidating because of the gums and the binders in the paint. It dries a little bit different than it goes on. You know, it might dry a little darker, a little bit lighter, which can be frustrating. It also is opaque, which is a lot different than watercolor. So it's a little bit daunting, but once you get to know the medium and you play around with it, it is actually very, very forgiving, which is what I love about it, because I'm the kind of person who likes to work on my paintings for way too long. I just want to like change every little thing, and I'm like, oh, that's not quite right. And like, you can really go in and change things quite a bit, which is really nice. And in my class that I'm going to be doing in all of the demos, we're going to be working in a limited color palette. So it's going to be a little bit of a hands-on gouache class, but also a color theory class. So what I learned when I learned how to paint with gouache was using complementary colors to create a value scale, which I'm sure many of you know about this, but I will pass around an example of a value scale that I make in preparation for a painting like this. So it's gonna be using only 2 colors plus white. And the colors that I use for this one are cobalt blue, and I think I actually grabbed the wrong one, and burnt sienna. So one of those is going to be our warm color, and one of those is obviously going to be our cool color, it's blue. And you're going to be able to create a wide range of values from that. And that's going to include really deep dark blacks. And then with the addition of white, you can make a wide range of chromatic grays, which is really great. And so the main principles that I try to work with in a composition, a gouache composition like this, is using those warm and cool tones to bring out your focal point in the middle, well, wherever it really is, but wherever you want your eye to go. So for example, on this one, the focal point is the pillow right in the middle of the chair. And the way that I'm going to achieve that is by making that the most chromatic place and also the most, the place in the piece with the most contrast. So that's what we're gonna do. And I'll just start painting and kind of talk to you guys about what's going on. And I urge you all to talk and ask questions, and let's make it a conversation, because really the best way to learn is just by doing, and that's what I'm gonna do. So if you have any questions about what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, I wanna answer your questions.
Nancy, what brand of gouache do you like or do you recommend?
I recommend one of 2 brands. I really love Winsor Newton, which is a classic. Forstall does not carry Winsor Newton gouache as far as I'm aware, but they do carry Holbein, which is maybe my favorite. It's so great, and they have a very wide range of colors. And it has this buttery smooth kind of consistency. It's really incredible. But there's also some beginner brands that are pretty good. What I would recommend you steer clear from is jelly gouache, which, I don't know,
Is that the name brand? Jelly Roll?
No, it's a different type of gouache. They come in pallets, and you can kind of peel off the top of it. It's like little tubs of gouache. And I don't love it, and I just wouldn't recommend it. I prefer tubes. It keeps you're not contaminating like a big pot of paint, if that makes sense. That's how I feel about it. And then another option, which is similar but different, is acrylic gouache, and this has like an acrylic medium in it, so it dries down like acrylic, and then it's permanent. So it paints like gouache, but then it stays where it is, and it dries kind of rubbery, almost like acrylic. So that's another option.
And you can't lift it.
You cannot lift it, no.
And can I just say, so like the main difference between acrylic wash and acrylic, all of the pigments are matte and they're all opaque. When in traditional acrylic, some are glossy, some are transparent. I just wanted to say,
Yeah.
'cause people ask me that, and I'm like, what is the difference?
Yeah.
It's the madness and the opacity.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and one reason that I love using acrylic gouache rather than acrylic, or sometimes I use them in tandem, but what I love about acrylic gouache is that it does dry down matte and it photographs beautifully. So when I do my really vibrant kind of color blocky paintings that are a little more whimsical than what I'm doing today. Today we're working in a pretty like limited neutral palette. When I'm working vibrantly, I always like to use acrylic gouache because it photographs like bright and just doesn't really affect it. There's no sheen, there's no gloss, so that is really, really nice. But I'm just gonna start by putting my 2 colors in my palette, just a little bit, pea-sized amount. And I'll start with, I've already started this one. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm not going to start one from the very beginning. But I'm just gonna take these 2 colors and start to make a neutral gray. And I think I'll start on the floor because it needs some work. And so what I have there is kind of a medium dark gray tone, and it's a little bit on the cooler side. And one thing to remember is that my focal point is warm, so I want the areas that I want to fall back into the background, I want those to be cooler. So I'm gonna make this a blue heavy gray. And I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'll add some brown and take it close to a black, and then add just a tiny bit of white.
Can I ask, what type of brushes do you like to use? Like, are they stiff or soft?
I like a soft brush, and I use a variety of round brushes and flat brushes. So depending on what I'm painting, the shape of the brush can make a big difference in the way my brush strokes come across. So a lot of times when I'm painting like foliage and I'm coming in like the negative spaces, I'll pass around an example actually, if you don't want to pass this around. I like to kind of come in the negative spaces with a small square flat brush, and that gives me kind of these geometric forms to work with. So it just depends on what area of the painting I'm working on, how much detail I want. Do I want to see my brush strokes? Do I not want to see my brush strokes? But I like to have both on hand, just so that I have some options. So right now I'm mixing this kind of neutral brown, and I want it to be a little bit cooler. So I'll add a little bit of blue.
So are you working on, is it illustration board or?
Yeah, so these are all on illustration board, and my little trick that I tell people is I like to gesso them first, which you don't typically do with water-based. I mean, I guess you can with water-based media, but in general, it really helps because since you can lift gouache back up off the page, if you make a massive mistake or you pile up way too much paint on top of each other, that's one thing with gouache that can get really tricky, is if you add too many layers, it'll start to crack like mud, and it just looks terrible unless that's what you're going for, I guess. And one thing you can do, like I said, is spray a little bit of water on a piece of paper towel or a rag and just wipe it right off the board. And the gesso lets you do that because the gesso is waterproof. So it's not necessarily going to sink down into the illustration board, which is nice.
You using like an acrylic gesso,
Yes, just like a traditional acrylic gesso, nothing fancy. And I like to water it down a bit because I don't want to feel too many ridges or brush strokes on it when I'm painting over it.
Can you use canvas to paint on gesso, or do you want the total flatness of the board?
You definitely want the flatness of the board, in my opinion. I mean, there's really no rules with art supplies, which is a beautiful thing. But in my experience with the types of paintings I like to do, I like it to be perfectly flat so that I can...
No texture.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And for something like acrylic or oil, you might want a little bit more texture. But for something like this, it's nice for it to be flat. And of course you could use an illustration board that is cold pressed and has a little bit more texture to it, but something like canvas would just kind of soak everything up, which is not really what you want. Oh, and one thing that I like to do, which is always a good idea, is to work from a reference. But my little trick that I like to do when working with a limited color palette is working from a black and white reference image. That way I'm not thinking too hard about the exact colors that I'm trying to match, because I'm not gonna get those colors. I have two colors that I'm working from, so they're not gonna give me, like, you know, if I have blue and brown, I'm not gonna make purple. So I can't match that exactly, but if I focus on the values that I'm trying to match, then that is gonna take me a lot farther. So the main two elements that you wanna focus on with this kind of painting is value and temperature, like I said. And so, like, let's say that looks a little warm to me. It brings it forward a little bit too much. I want it to fall back, so I'm just gonna add some blue. And come over here and try to let it fall back a little bit to the background. And a trick that I even like to do is, if I'm trying to match a value, I can paint it. You can see I did it here. I like to paint it directly on my reference sometimes. And usually I have everything flat on a table all next to each other. And so I can kind of work.
I was just gonna see if a little light on it would show us
Yeah.
in the back. She's got some texture on the chair. It's just, it's hard to see with
Yeah.
the light in here, but that is not. so
Yeah, and y'all are
shows.
welcome to come stand up or
yeah.
bring your
Yeah.
chairs closer. Or yeah, I am working fairly small. But y'all are welcome to come closer if you like. But let's say, so I usually like to work from a bigger brush down to a smaller brush. So this one's getting a little big, let's say, for the details on the chair. So I'll switch it out for another round brush, but a bit smaller. This one is covered in paint, but I would guess it's close to a 3. But that's one of my favorite brushes for blocking out details like this. So I just want to map out the change in value in the areas where the wicker kind of crosses over each other. I try not to get too bogged down with the details right at first, because we're still in kind of the ugly phase of this painting.
So when you're finished, do you probably don't varnish it because you want to keep the matte look. Do you just like spray it to fix it? Do you do anything to it when you're finished with it?
I will use
For
a fix it.
preservation? Fix it?
I use a Winsor Newton matte varnish, but I use a very, very thin coat. Too much will make the gouache start to bloom a little bit, and it'll look kind of frosty and fuzzy, which does not look very good. So you want to be very sparing with it, because if you do, if you leave it unvarnished, they will start to dull over time and lose their color. So especially if you're working with more vibrant colors, and a lot of the illustrations that I like to do with gouache are very vibrant. I like to use a lot of neon colors and really, really bright things.
Nancy, did you frame any of your work?
I have the ones that I'm working from here. I have another that's at Forstall. But I can provide some images. I can put them up on the screen. I actually have one that's a little bit more illustrative that I can put up. It's a portrait of my grandparents. And it has kind of stylized mountains around it. But I'll put that up on the screen for you guys.
Is your stuff still at Wheelhouse, or is that?
Oh yeah, well I do have a whole body of work at Wheelhouse that's kind of a different type of thing. Wheelhouse Salon is downtown. It's actually right around the corner from Forstall. And I recently had an art show there through Studio by the Tracks, where I did an artist residency that just concluded. But that body of work was butterflies on panels, all in acrylic and pastels. And it's a vibrant rainbow explosion, very different. None of them are gouache, but yeah, if you guys are interested, those are all still on display at Wheelhouse. And it's a fun little different thing that I was doing. It's cool.
And so as you're painting, because it does lift, like if I'm doing it, which I'm not a gouache artist, but you know, I tend to move and let it dry, so I'll move to another area of the board. I mean, is that something you're paying attention to or not? You're just sort of letting it lift, or?
Well, it really will only lift if you go over it, you kind of like, you know, work into it, or if your brush is too wet. So that's an element of working with gouache that is similar to oil painting. For any oil painters, are you familiar with the concept of fat over lean? Yeah, so that applies to gouache as well. So your first layers you want to be relatively thin and watered down, And then as you work up on top of it, you want your layers to become a little bit less diluted, and you want your paint to be a little thicker. I like to say that I work from, my first layers, I like to water my gouache down to the consistency of like skim milk. And then as I continue the painting, I like to work all the way up to something that's a little bit closer to heavy cream. So on the dairy scale, you're getting a little bit higher in fat content. And that's the general idea. But, and it just keeps things from, like you said, it keeps the paint underneath from lifting. Because if you are continuing to put wet on wet on wet on wet, it will lift up. And you don't want that. And then also you want your top layers to be the most opaque. So you might be doing like white highlights on a lake or on a piece of fruit, and you want those little white spots to be perfectly opaque. And it's not going to be if your paint is too watered down. So that's the idea there.
I love the dairy scale.
The dairy scale, I have been using that example for a long time now, and it really clicks for people, yeah, because it can be kind of a frustrating medium. I will be so honest. It can be very irritating sometimes because it just doesn't really always do what you want it to do, and especially when you paint and then you put it down and it feels like it's like almost black, and then it dries and it's gray. It's like, that's not quite what I wanted. You just gotta play around with it and work back into it, and you get the hang of it after a while.
So if you apply it too thickly, it cracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know if it's too thick?
Well, if it cracks, then it's too thick. But also, you start to get the feeling that it's getting a little bit more texture than you want. It maybe is lifting a little bit more than it would if it was nice and flat. Just because you have a buildup of paint there that's almost like working into like a little pot of like dried watercolor or something. It's like it's gonna lift it up because there's no board under it. It's just like stratified paint, at that point, and it'll just start to be a little bit less forgiving, which is just part of it. But again, you can just lift it right back up. So what I'm gonna do right now is try to indicate a little bit more of a focal point with a slightly more vibrant orange there. And who asked about moving around the board, in different places? Was that you? I do like to do that. I'll like leave something and just go to something else, and I just hop all around. I was never the kind of person who like works top to bottom every tiny little detail, because I'll get bored. And I kind of want to hop around. And you also want to let it dry. See, that's way too dark, so I'll add some white. So I know I asked, but I'd love to know who works with gouache often?
I work with it quite a bit, but I would call it more like playing than working,
Yeah,
actually.
I would say the same for me too, honestly. What do you like about it?
I like the flatness of it, and I use it a lot over transparent watercolor too.
Yeah.
I start with that as a layer.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I'm working on something right now that I also use colored pencil along with it. So it's those three seem to work together really well.
Yeah, they layer very, very well together.
I used it once because I was having trouble getting the background of a flower, a brilliant, dark, completely red background, like an illustration sort of. And I couldn't, and no matter what acrylic red I used, it wasn't covering. It's nice and flat. And someone gave me a little tube of the acrylic, I think it was the acrylic gouache. And it did a beautiful job of filling it in. So it's the only time that it really did the job, because the acrylics were not doing it.
Yeah, if you want something opaque, it is like the perfect paint. Especially if you are already working with watercolor, it's a great way to add highlights to something. I was telling somebody earlier, I used to work at Dick Blick Art Materials when I was in art school. The one in Savannah.
I love that one.
It's a great one. I mean, it was a wonderful place to work. I loved it. But one thing that I really liked to do, and my coworkers eventually kind of clocked me for it, was hanging out in the gouache aisle and waiting for watercolor painters to come out and try to convert them. I did that all the time. And we started calling it the gouache gospel, as I was preaching it. But the way that I would do that, and really it is a great piece of advice for watercolor painters, because they're like, well, what masking fluid should I get to keep my highlights white, keep the paper white, so that I can have these bright highlights at the end? And I said, get a tube of white gouache. Don't worry about that. But that's just me, because that is too much of a headache. It's like playing chess, instead of checkers. I'm like, I don't need to do that. So I would always recommend that watercolor painters get at least a tube of white, if not, a whole set of gouache.
Okay, so back in the dark ages, when I first learned watercolor, when I was in college, we used Chinese white. Is that gouache?
Yeah, Chinese white is a popular gouache white.
But I had never heard of gouache, until fairly recently. So I guess it's kind of having a moment right now.
Yeah.
But it's been around forever for illustration. I just never had any illustration classes.
And that's what, so used to, as an old advertising graphic designer person, that's what you use for illustrations, and fine artists really looked down on it back then because it wasn't light fast enough, and that was the rumor, When fine artists were like, we're not using that, it's not light fast, it's not this and that, and the advertising people liked it, I guess, because it's fast, it dries quick,
And
it's
it dries
flat,
quick.
you can photograph it,
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. That's not something that I knew.
Yeah,
And
you don't do that.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
right.
and see, we're all, it's that's good. Wow, very interesting. And the reason why I probably got an education in gouache was because I was an illustration major. Because that's the whole reason that Stephen Gardner, who taught me, uses gouache, is because he's scanning them to put on book covers, right? And when you think of all of those like older movie posters, like, well, even like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, those ones that have kind of vignettes of someone's face and the villain, and someone's down here and someone's up here. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Those, and they're very vibrant, and most of those are gouache paintings, which is very, very, very cool. Especially when you start to try to kind of clock it when you see them. But that's interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. As an illustrator, I'm kind of impatient, and so something that dries this quickly is really very nice.
I had always equated gouache with poster paint that you used as a child and it
Temper paint.
fluffed off.
Yeah,
Well, it has a lot of the same properties.
it does. Yeah.
Wait, does anybody here know Kay Lewis?
Yeah.
Kay
She
Lewis.
started to do this.
She used to live in Birmingham and she moved to South Carolina a few years ago, but she taught at Forstall, and she used gouache in such an interesting way. She had been an oil painter and she did plein air and oil, but as she got tired of lugging all of the oil paint and mediums and stuff around, she switched to gouache, and she was doing like a lot of palette knife gouache plein air paint. And it was so cool. Like, it was such interesting work because it has this effect of, it's all matte and like it's just very unified looking.
It's quick. So is she like on Instagram now or
Yeah,
somewhere?
yeah, her Instagram, and she was kind of retiring because she has like grandkids and was
What
just
was
like.
her name again?
Her name is Kay Lewis.
So when she paints that thick, it doesn't crack?
You know, I don't know how
See,
she
that's
does
fascinating
it.
to me.
That was my first thought was
Because
the palette
she's
knife.
completely
That's
going
too
against
thick,
what I'm
yeah.
telling you right
Yeah.
now,
Well, and how expensive is that? You
That
know,
was
it's
my thought. I'm like,
it's
this tiny
I was
tube of gouache is
So
$14 tube of gouache.
Her
Yes.
Instagram is KAYLEWIS art. And if you scroll down a little bit, she's got this beautiful,
Oh, it says their account's private.
wow. I can show
You
y'all
can
here, let me
message
show you.
her.
This is,
Maybe she has a website.
I don't know if y'all can really see that.
Wow.
So that's like this, and she did that with gouache on an 11 by 14 panel.
Wow.
And I thought it was so interesting. Yeah.
You did?
So how did she do it? Yeah, it was cool. So do you remember how she did it without the paint cracking?
We use brushes and each.
There it is. Peggy Holt Lewis.
Probably did two.
That's her. It's got that little icon.
So she,
Yeah, and let it dry. Things like that.
so did she use a palette knife or was it all brush?
She talked about the palette knife, but we use brushes.
There she is.
You know, Martha Fulgham uses watercolor medium.
Yeah, it's pretty white.
Is that?
Oh,
That's
watercolor
interesting.
medium like gum Arabic?
Acrylic.
No, it's called watercolor medium, I got it.
I don't know about that.
It's just,
Acrylic.
yeah, that is exactly what it's called. I don't-
Is it GWA?
I tried it. I mean, it does help it, you know, it's like an
It's French.
extender, it keeps it from, like.
Oh yeah, take a look. These are the gouache, the acrylic gouache.
But when you're doing the next on it,
It's a great cleaner medium.
I was there.
A very alternative to oil.
Is it
I
on
wonder how
paper?
You can do it on
That's
board.
how she does it.
You know, I was actually
She's not
asking.
sure it's that,
It's too textured, but like you could do it on wood, or you can do it on like a gesso board, or Yupo. I feel like Yupo would actually be
Like, what's her name, has the gel medium, that's her smooth, what's her name?
Too much
Especially
Mhm.
So it keeps.
Yeah, 'cause I mean,
Yeah.
if you're already worried about cracking, then yeah, canvas would not
Because I
be.
think hers, I mean, for me, what little I've done.
Nancy, have you ever used like
Yeah.
Yupo?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Not with gouache. I've used it with ink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you ever used like gesso board, you know, for that gouache?
I don't love it.
You don't like it?
No, not going straight in with the gouache for this gesso board can be a little.
Porous.
It's a, yeah. Well, I had the opposite problem where I felt like it would kind of like beat up and not really stay where I laid it. I would almost want to like sit with it.
Yeah.
Because it could be a little slippery, almost like playboard.
Yeah. What about aqua board?
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
you know, because another thing I wanted to talk to you about is you frame your work that you gouache, right? Because it's all on illustration board, but if you did like an aqua board,
Then
you would have to frame it.
And what I have done, which can be a little tricky, is painting on watercolor paper, and I also do ink drawings, I do those on watercolor paper, and I'll mount them on a panel.
Yeah.
What'd you
I mount mine.
say? You mount them on what?
A wooden panel.
Oh, yeah.
I like to do that.
Mount it with just medium or?
Yeah, you can do it with medium or with like a spray kind of adhesive, but you wanna make sure you get one that's archival.
Have you ever used like the watercolor ground?
Not for mounting.
One for painting on.
Oh, no, I haven't, actually. It's-
I'm curious, I wonder, because it's meant for watercolor, but I think you could totally do gouache.
Cause it's got a little bit of like grit to it, right? Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't actually used it. The way that I learned is kind of this weird like backwards Illustrator way where you're gessoing it so that it's fully flat. And you're not even really working like you would with watercolor. So no, but I would like to try that.
Do any of you all that are oil painters know Ann Blair Brown? She lives
Oh,
in
yeah.
the Nashville area. She taught a workshop in how to do plein air painting with gouache, and Kathy Ferris took it. And I just remember talking with her about it, but she's a good one to look up and see her work. Ann Blair Brown. And another one I just saw in North Carolina is Richard Oversmith. Richard does beautiful plein air oil work, but he had some really stunning gouache plein air work that was. Did you say you usually put it under glass when you frame it or not? Or do you just put a varnish on your
I, in the
pieces?
past, have just put a varnish, but a lot of people will put glass
Oh,
over.
I think these are mostly under glass.
And Martha used cold wax.
Oh, yeah, gold wax.
Yeah, that would be it.
Cold wax.
Jenny, I'm just sending it to you on Instagram.
Have you ever varnished with gold wax or finished it?
No, I haven't. What's the benefit of that?
It's a unified mat. And it's not technically UV protectant, but it's beeswax, and beeswax is a natural UV protectant, so it can. And then it makes it waterproof, which is the main benefit.
It almost makes like an encaustic kind of look.
Yeah.
Speaking of encaustics, we just have a moment, because I haven't gotten this in the newsletter in case I don't. There's a group, Marilyn Wilson is a longtime gallery owner and artist. She has a group of, right now it's 10 women that do encaustic painting with beeswax and pigment. It's a unique kind of art. And we're having a group show at Aldrich Gardens in December. Like the very end of November to December and January, after everybody spent all their money at our show. But
And tell them what you're called. I like what
oh yes, because to use encaustic paint, you have to heat it, because the wax has to be applied while it's molten. And so you can use a heat gun, an embossing gun, or a what do you call it? Torch, blow torch. We're called the Ladies of the Fire.
Fire ladies.
It's good. Fire ladies. We can change that.
While we're talking about
Yeah.
gouache, I have to share my gouache, well, we're talking about caustic, I need to share my caustic story. Carlos, if you've taken my class, you've heard this. My advisor at Troy was Pam Allen, and she was a brilliant encaustic painter. She painted photographically, but in encaustic. Most encaustic is very abstract. She painted representational in encaustic, which is stunning to see. And I love to light things on fire. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do encaustic, and I'd never done encaustic before, never heard of it. And she got me all set up with hot plate and whatever, and I was coloring the wax with oil paint and whatnot. Well, no one told me I couldn't heat up the turpentine. Long story short, I didn't do encaustic anymore. No, I just made some mustard gas. But it was just like,
It's good you're doing your show in the winter. One of my friends did encaustic, and his art was melting at a summer show.
Well, it is like in the summer, it's not good
I've
for it.
actually seen that happen. Pam used this as an example when I was at Troy, but she had an encaustic painting on panel, and she didn't do something right with the gesso or whatever, and the whole painting in one piece slid off, which was kind of amazing. So then she took the paint and she just mounted it on another board better, and it was like the whole thing in one piece. Just like this kind of, you know how you can peel paint off of a palette in one piece, it's kind of split.
Skin.
Didn't phase her at all.
Well, I had one that I left in my black Honda Pilot on a hot summer day. I was at the doctor, it took too long at the doctor, but it's my fault. And I came out and there's this finished piece, it was this big, and it was sagging. And I went, oh, turned it flat, got it home. The neat thing is you can take the torch, the heat element, and move it around and kind of reattach it. It didn't fall off, but I moved it around. It sold at the show. It's forgiving in its own way.
I don't know if y'all familiar with the artist Bo Bartlett, in Columbus, Georgia. Bo's one of the, leading realist painters in the United States. But his wife, Nancy, is an encaustic painter, abstract encaustic painter. If y'all don't follow Bo Bartlett, you absolutely should. He's on Instagram, he's wonderful. But Nancy paints with encaustic and huge, giant paintings. And they're done on panel, but she stretches canvas on the panel first. So she's got the texture of the canvas and then the hard back of the panel. And it's really, she's up there on a ladder with a brush and a giant blowtorch.
That's amazing.
And the canvas does the same thing.
Back to you, Nancy.
Yeah, I'm just chugging along, y'all. Yeah, I like hearing your stories. That's nice. I'm just coming in and refining. I mean, my whole process. There's really with the way that I do it, there's truly a long, ugly stage that happens, and then all of a sudden it starts to get tightened up, and it's like, oh,
I love the little cast shadow you put in there, and
Thank
how
you.
nicely that breathes.
Well, one thing that can be a little tricky with gouache is those subtle kind of blends, because it is so opaque that your brush strokes can kind of they stand out against each other, So doing something like that can be a little tricky. And I believe the way that I did that is I took a damp brush, not wet, and I'll take a similar color. Let's see if I can make a similar color.
Was it a little watery, would you say, when you put that
Yes,
shadow in?
that one was that was definitely a bit watery. But what I'll do, I just want to make sure that's a similar tone. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. A little more white. I'll have a little bit on my brush and then kind of dry brush it off. And then you can kind of dry brush it. And then I kind of clean my brush off. It's like a little bit of a process of wetting and drying, and I want to make sure it's not too wet. But I'll even blend it a little bit. And this is where you're kind of working with the lifting property. If you want to create a little bit of a color blend, because I'm blending together the color I just put down with the background color that I put down, a week ago.
Yeah, so you're reactivating the background color a little bit.
Exactly. So I'm lifting it up a little bit, letting it kind of marry with another color. And that's gonna give it that softness. Like, you can really soften a line. Like, let's say I want this top edge to be a little softer. I can kind of come in and just barely soften it up. And that's where you're kind of working with those tricky properties of it. You can kind of make them work in your favor,
That shadow does look good.
which is nice. And there it goes. And see there, I got it kind of not where I want it. But I'm pretty rough with them. I'll use my fingers and
Do you
smear
use
it off.
Q-tips with the little pointy cotton swabs, or?
Oh, I'm not so delicate. I use my pinky.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, totally. A lot of times, my favorite thing to do is take my little corner of my rag and make a little point, and then I'll kind of come in and I can tidy up a little area. Or like I said with this one, if there's an area that's just not right, I've been working on getting the right color for so long, and it's just, I'm not quite getting there, and it's starting to layer up a little bit, which is not what you want. I'll dip my rag in some water and I'll just wipe it right up. I'll show you how it works actually. And this is dirty water, but that's okay. I'll squeeze it out a little bit. Let's say I put the moon in the totally wrong place. I can just wipe it right up. Wow. You can come in with the clean side.
Like an eraser.
It's like an eraser, and that's the gesso working, because it's waterproof to an extent. And you can just wipe it right up. You could just wipe off a whole painting if you wanted to, which is nice. And sometimes I'll do that, and it feels like wasted paint and a wasted time. But sometimes, if I've really kind of finally nailed the right color, but the paint is just too thick, I'll have my color in my palette and I'll just wipe it up and put it down like it was the first color I put, you know, and then it's, you know, nice and flat, but it's, you know, all of my work getting up to there. It's like, I finally got there, let me just like lay it back down. So that's one way that I'll kind of make it work in my favor. Yeah, so I'm just kind of like working on top of myself here. I like to block in big areas of color, and then if they're not quite right, I'll just go right back over them with a layer of paint that is a little bit thicker. So that would be like 2% or, you know, half and half maybe, something like that. But you know, the thicker the paint, the more opaque it's gonna be. And that just helps you kind of cover what you're trying to cover. Or, you know, one thing that you can do with gouache that I really love is kind of coming around the edge of something and carving it out. So let's say I want this, I've made the floor here a little too dark maybe, and I want the spindle of the bottom spindle of the chair to stand out a little bit more. I can come, let's see, this should be a little lighter. I can come around it and just carve it out, that shape. And that is one of the most satisfying things ever. I love to do it.
It's like you're pulling out a highlight a little bit, you're just lifting the color. Do
Exactly.
you gesso your illustration board with 1, 2, 3 coats of gesso, or how many?
1 coat of gesso,
Just 1 coat.
and I like to water it down. Because gesso, I mean, different brands they differ, but typically it's gonna come out where you're gonna get some brush strokes on it.
Yes, you want it to be smooth.
I want it to be smooth. So I water it down so that it's, I want to go dairy again because it's white, but just a little bit thinner so that when you brush it on, you're not seeing any brush strokes. And I do it kind of in an X shape with a nice wide gesso brush, something like 2 inches, depending on the size that I'm working on, just to get a nice cover. And then a trick, if you are doing a painting like this on illustration board, I will gesso the back first, because they tend, when you put the gesso on and it gets a little wet and it starts to dry, it'll bow a little bit. So if you gesso the back first, and it'll bow, and then you let it dry, flip it over, gesso the other side, it'll even out. Yeah. That's the trick. So if you're ever gessoing illustration board for any reason, that's just a good thing to remember, because
I knew you were supposed to do it front and back, but I thought you were supposed to do it at the same time. You do one, let it dry, and then that makes sense because then it, you know, does the opposite.
yeah, and I do it kind of in succession like that, just because I want to be able to work flat, you know, and if it's wet underneath, it might stick to my table or something, but that's mainly the idea, is so that it stays nice and flat. And that's my little trick that I learned in school.
So you like to work flat when you're not demoing?
Yeah, typically, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know how you're doing it.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a little shaggier than it would be, but that's okay, you know. I want you guys to be able to see.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, so so in the demos I've been doing, and I'm just kind of like, hey. In the demos that I'm doing, in the class at Forstall, everyone will be seated, working on the table. And I like to have kind of all of my materials out in front of me, so you have your reference kind of right next to what you're working on. You can reference it pretty easily, and like I said, I like to paint directly on my reference just to make sure I'm value matching. And it's nice to have kind of a mise en place if you know about cooking. I actually come from a kitchen background. I worked at Bottega and Highlands when I was a teenager, and it definitely applies to the way I like prep every single thing, lay it all out.
So what kind of subject matter, what kind of reference are you gonna do for your workshop?
Or
is everybody bringing something different, or are you gonna have? I
think I'm gonna have some options. So in the past I've done 2 options. People can choose, like I had this chair, and then I also had like a skyscape, like a landscape. I'll probably do something seasonal, because we're getting towards the holidays, maybe like a wintry scene, like a snowy landscape. because working with two colors like this, I like to pick references that, you know, you can create gray from these two and make a fully grayscale piece, but really they come to life when you incorporate one or both of the colors, and it's like vibrant, you know, in a vibrant way. And doing shadows in blue on the snow is just always so beautiful. So you can incorporate the more neutral tones, but then also those more vibrant shadows. So I'm thinking something like that. But by all means for the class, since it's a longer span of time, we'll probably work on one that's all the same reference all together, and then people can bring something in. One thing I love to do is portraits. That's my favorite. One thing I like to do is live portraits at events. I did that at Studio by the Tracks Benefit Art from the Heart this year, and it was so much fun. It's a little bit daunting because, you know, the person's sitting right in front of you, and it's like,
Were they
gotta look
like
good.
caricature size, or were they little figures with no faces, or what were they?
Oh, they were ink drawings, like gesture ink drawings of about here up.
Nice.
How long for each setting?
Probably 5 to 10 minutes.
Nice.
They were pretty quick, pretty gestural. But I love ink drawing and figure drawing. So it was a ton of fun. It was a good experiment for sure. It was a learning opportunity, but I liked it quite a bit. So one thing I've been having trouble with this whole time, that you might have seen me kind of like going over it and over and over it, is the pillow. I want it to be the first thing you see. I want it to pop out. It's not really doing that right now. It is a little bit, but I really want it to shine. What's going on there? Oh no. Okay, we're good. Because in my reference, it stands out a lot more than it is there, right? It's one of the lightest things, except for the wall. But I want it to stand out more than the wall, so I can take, you know, an artistic liberty there. So what I'm going to do is get some really bright white that is not muddied up by everything in here. It's a hot little mess in there. But so I'm going to get some unadulterated white and be very sparing with my grays. I'm going to try to put in just some burnt sienna at first, and try to get it almost to like a light orange. And that's what I like to do. One example of that, I don't know where that painting went that I passed around. Oh, there it is. Perfect. This is a good example of temperature with focal point. So the window here on the roof is bright saturated orange. That's the focal point. But I also wanted to incorporate that warmth into the moon. So you might be able to tell, I can pass it around again, but I didn't use pure white there. I used a very, 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 very light orange. So that gives it that contrast, not only in value, but in temperature, and that draws your eye right in, which is nice. So I'm gonna try to do the same thing here and make it pop out a little bit using both of those things. So I'm just gonna keep mixing and see what happens. One thing I love to paint is buildings. And we had this really fun project at SCAD that I would definitely be interested in working with some people on, is taking a picture of a doorway somewhere in town. And this was in Savannah, so there's so many like beautiful old doorways on Jones Street. And so we would walk around town and take a nice picture of a beautiful doorway, and then we would imagine something coming out of it. You know, what's it gonna be? And the whole idea of this was that either warm or cool focal point, and playing with temperature, you know, your background and everything that you want to fade away will be, you know, if your focal point is warm, everything else will be cool, and vice versa. So one example was the doorway was opening, and inside was Antarctica and penguins walking out. And so it had this nice blue light that was casting, you know, highlights on everything, and then the shadows were the deep warm browns. And it's a really kind of fun, imaginative way to play with these concepts, Because it's like, well, what could be coming out of there that would be warm or cool? Is there a volcano?
Dragons.
Yeah, exactly. You know, something could.
Warm dragons.
Yeah, exactly. It was a ton of fun. And it's a great way to start thinking about these things, especially if you're a beginner, you know, which it doesn't seem like any of you are.
Oh, I'm definitely a beginner in gouache.
Yeah. It's really fun. You know, it's actually interesting. My first time working with gouache, my grandmother passed away when I was probably 12 or 13, and I didn't even know it. And I was always interested in art, but I didn't even know that she was an artist, and she went to art school and had this huge collection of art materials. I mean, oil paints, pastels, pencils, everything. And so when I decided to go to art school, and I got all my materials lists, I had it all already. I had down to the brand. I mean, I had the General Sketch and Wash pencils, and I had the, you know, kneaded erasers, and I had every single thing that I needed, because she also went to art school, and she happened, you know, I happened to come across her art materials, and that felt very special to me.
Yeah, what a great story.
Yeah, and so my first time working with gouache, she had this, and I don't know if they make these anymore, but it's this red Caran d'Ache gouache palette. That's this plastic case, and it has, you know, all of your colors, kind of like watercolor pucks a little bit. So it's set up like that, and I just thought it was watercolor. And I was like, oh, it's in this cool red case, and had her name written on it, and it felt, you know, special. And so that is what I would paint with all the time. If I was making a birthday present for someone, or painting their cat, or, you know, anything like that, I would just use that palette. And I didn't even really realize that it was different than watercolor, but then I would use watercolor. I'm like, why is it not opaque? I don't understand. And so, but I thought I was using watercolor, but it was really gouache, because it was my grandma's.
Nancy, you continue on just as you are, but we're gonna call out names, we're giving away door prizes, so we're
Okay.
gonna go ahead and do that.
Oh yeah, feel free. I'm just
You
gonna
continue talking.
work and yeah.
Real casual here.
Yeah, that's how I like it. I'm very casual. I like to just kind of hang out, and my favorite kind of.
Come and pick out a prize.
You won.
What do you win?
We don't know yet.
Oh, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Art supplies.
Door
Right,
prizes.
stuff from
That's right, for some stuff.
Oh well, then that's good stuff.
I like the gift cards.
Yeah, because then you get whatever you want.
I like any of it.
Yeah, me too.
It's finally popping out in the way that I want.
You know what I mean?
You can see
That's what
kind
normally do.
of where I
It's
was
left, and
thinking,
so
and
you
now
know.
it's like, okay, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, it's really.
I'm working on
It's
camera.
popping now.
I just went to Gallup.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm working with that kind of light orange, and I don't want it to be, you know, vibrant.
Oh, no, you should never use straight white.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That looks great. I couldn't see too well.
Yeah, you know, working
Everybody
small.
was going.
The idea, and also in the class that I'll be doing, the idea is to work small to large. You know, we'll start with color prompts just to get the feeling of the paint, you know, on the board. Don't think too hard about it, just map it all out. And then we'll scale up to something much bigger than this. This is kind of our starting size. And it's just all kind of part of the process, because it can be, like I said, it can be a little daunting to work with a new material. Thank you. So the idea is to kind of take it step by step.
I'm gonna volunteer.
Yeah, and work all the details. You get so bogged down. I like to use broad strokes. Talk about, you know, making it ugly before it's pretty. Just get it down. Make it exist first. Oh, Thank you. The kind of wonky
Right.
angle.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the word.
kind of
It's like-
Van Gogh inspired with this one. Yeah? I will. Sounds like her. Geez. Yeah, she's a good close family friend of ours. We live right next door to her.
But the way some works on, I just started something. And that's all I can do. She's wonderful. I'm working on a 4x4.
There's no one quite like Ida Faye in this world. That's how I feel. I will. I'm gonna go hang out with her tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very subtle. Very subtle.
There you go.
Well, I'm just, months, and so I haven't, the inclination that you have.
Where are they
Just in personal. I was trying to get way too much more. With the voice, I'm like singing. It's just like, well, and it also leads me to do things that I really don't have the heart for, but I want to try. So I feel like a waste, not waste, because I'm wrong, but it draws me away. A little bit that way, Jenny, because I love to try materials. And I'll get distracted and
I wonder if that's what I grew up using. It's a current gouache wash palette, and they're these little square things. Yeah. I think that's what.
It's just, it's got a vegetable.
Well, in a way, but at the same time, I
Oh, the more you know.